I go by the name Shotade Olusegun. In today's particular live session, I'm going to dissect the mystery of quantum gravity. Yes, of course, you heard me right. Quantum gravity. I'm going to give you the visual representation of what quantum gravity is as it is being solved by formula of everything. So in this video, I'm going to actually review this particular video that I have here, and then I'm going to use that to explain what the quantum gravity is all about. I'm going to actually let you understand what classical gravity is and what quantum gravity is to classical gravity. So it's going to be quite insightful, it's going to be informative. You're really going to enjoy it because it's going to unravel the mystery that scientists have been struggling to unravel. So now, with no further ado, let's dive into it. We're going to watch this particular video, and I want you to pay rapt attention to it. You are going to see how this particular man is arranging rocks, as you can see on the screen, in such a way that the tiny rock can actually sustain a big rock. You understand? So basically, this man is tapping into the power of gravity. So there is this tiny field of gravity where we have, balanced motion. So if you can actually lock in into that, you can actually balance things irrespective of what the size of that particular thing is. And in this particular video, I'm going to go deeply into mysterious balance in the universe. So now let's dive into it.
As crazy as this sounds, these rocks aren't glued, tied, or supported in any way. See? But how could structures like this, and this be possible? Let's find out. Meet Michael.
My name is Michael Grab, and I have been balancing rocks for 12 years.
It all started when Michael was spending time by the river.
I usually come down to the creek on hot summer days to relax, and one time I was hanging out with a friend and we were having a psychedelic experience and just started balancing rocks by accident.
He tried to create his first stone balance with some rocks that he found by the river. He realized it wasn't so easy. But with a little bit of persistence, he made his first stone balance.
In order to do it, you have to focus on these very tiny vibrations. To stay focused on those vibrations is like purely focused on now. Tap into the animal mind, or like a flow state.
In the beginning, his stone balances were small and simple. But after years of practice, they became pretty impressive. He makes them with different rocks in different countries all around the world. And some even made their way into high-end art installations.
Michael, it looks amazing. What are you using to hold it together?
Just balance. Gravity is the only glue.
And while some may find this hard to believe, it's true. Michael only uses gravity. Here's how he does it. First, he finds a stable rock to use as a base. Then, he looks for rocks with special shapes and surfaces. Then, he uses the weight of his rocks to stabilize his balance as he builds up.
Once I get a sequence of rocks selected, I basically just start working with it and make really tiny micro adjustments until I feel that very thin thread of balance go through the rocks. I call that the 0 point. It's when the rocks stop and I intuitively know that they're balanced.
But here's something even more interesting. Michael removes every stone balance that he's ever built.
I prefer to remove my work and leave
Into patterns of gravity. I'm going to dive deeply into the mysterious nature of gravity. And I'm going to use my novel research discovery to do this. So you are going to get this solution of quantum gravity through the scientific perspective. So I want you to watch this video till the end because it's going to be quite interesting. Now you have seen what this man did in this particular video, and I must tell you that this man understands what he's actually doing. You know, he said something. He said that he was only using gravity, and that when you reach the point where you have this tiny vibration, or where you have no vibration at all, then you know that the rock is stable. Then you can release the hand for the rock to actually stand. This man knows what he's talking about. He said it's more or less like being in the present. So there is this tiny field at the present phase, or rather you can as well call it at event horizon. There is this tiny field which is more or less like transiting field. So the field, by applying formula of everything, I realized that this field is static and undulating. So it is static, but at the same time undulating. So it has no directional momentum, even though it has momentum. You understand? So that is what we're going to use to actually, drag my point home in this live session. So now let's dive into it. First of all, I'm going to use this particular diagram to actually explain to you what my novel research discovery is all about. So I want you to focus your attention on this particular formula. This is the formula that I called formula of everything. It is the TDM. So the TDM stands for the curvature, as we have in this particular diagram. So the TDM, stands for the curvature of this blue trajectory to the red trajectory. So the blue trajectory is the curvature of time, while the red trajectory is the curvature of energy. So now I'm going to expand it further for you to actually get to see this formula of everything quite all right. This formula is quite powerful to the extent that it fits back on itself. So what I'm trying to say here is that when you use an input, that input will generate output. Then you can use that generated output as input to further generate output. That is, the whole idea of this formula feeding back on itself. But then right inside the curvature of time to energy, we have this nested linear solution in form of capital Um plus 4m. Now you can see that what we have at the back of equal to is a linear solution, and based on that we could have this equilateral triangle as we have it right here. Now the entirety of this diagram represents the full potential of universe. So basically the way we use this formula is for you to just specify what you know. It doesn't matter what you don't know. If you know the mass worth of electron, you can just substitute that right in the place of the two m's, and when you do that you will get the classical counterpart of that quantum mass worth. For instance, let's say we supply the mass worth of electron as what we have right here at the right bottom corner. If that is what we supply in the formula, then we're going to instantly get the real classical mass worth, which is going to be 2,277,250,000 kilograms. So this is going to be the counterpart, which would be the classical mass to that quantum mass. Now, from that, you can see that we can actually, navigate from quantum realm to the classical realm, and as well, we can navigate from the classical realm down to the quantum realm. Now, let's see what happens if we're to use this classical mass worth in the place of the two m's as we have it right here to reconfirm the quantum mass worth that we used, in this case the mass of electron. Now what we get when we supply this classical mass worth, the answer we're going to get will now be this 5.7 times 10 raised to power 48. By having this to be the answer, we know that this trajectory is at classical realm. Now you can see that right from this horizontal dashed line up to the curvature of time, that is what I call classical realm. Now right from the dashed horizontal line down to the curvature of energy, that's what I call quantum realm. Okay, so now when we supply the classical mass worth in the formula, we're going to get this. But then this particular value, if we'll expand it in standard form, then we're going to have this quantum mass value, the base value of this electron's mass, we're going to have it being suspended at 32nd position. We're going to get it to be suspended at 32nd position. So we have a couple of zeros that we suspend that weak conveying value. I call this 4m weak conveying force, while this capital UM is strong conveying force. So now by having that suspension, then we can actually annihilate the suspended zeros, only the suspended zeros. Now when we annihilate the suspended zeros manually, but just take note that the suspended zeros can be annihilated spontaneously, but in our own case, since we're using mathematics, we can manually annihilate it for us to to bridge the divergence that we have. So this diagonal trajectory, it represents the constancy of gravity, and this red diagonal trajectory represents the constancy of light speed. So we have this inverse relationship between the two because the relationship of time to energy is inverse. So when time scales wide, energy will be low. Then when time scales narrow, energy will be high. So we're going to have highly energetic momentum of energy in a compacted region of time. So now once we understand that relationship of time to energy to be inverse, then we know that we need to bridge this gap by manually annihilating the suspended zeros. Since we are annihilating the suspended zeros, it means that the trajectory is going to be vertical. It's going to be instant in that sense. And so by the time we do that, we're going to have that base value of electron, which is in this case 9109. Don't take note that the base value is not 9.109. So we have the base value to be 9109, and we know that the suspension is at classical realm. So to annihilate manually, what we have to do is just to say 9109 over 10 raised to power 32. Don't forget that the suspended position is at 32nd. So we're going to say 10 raised to power 32. So now when we'll expand that fraction further, so we're going to have 9.109 times 1 all over 10 raised to power 32. So when we solve that further, we're going to have it to be 9.109 times 10 raised to power minus 32. Now the value that we have gotten is small to the value of the electron that we initially used, and that is telling us that that value is being decayed to what we have, and it's an indication that the trajectory has been shifted from that vertical position into the black hole. The implication of that is that this vertical trajectory as we have it, where we have instancy of time, is telling us that the trajectory can only be applied one time, even though the trajectory could be applied forward or backward, you understand. But for us to actually get the quantum mass worth at its exact position, we need to apply that trajectory one time. So the relativity of classical mass worth to quantum mass worth is something that has to be done once. So it's either you use what you know to get what you don't know, but for you to reconfirm what you have used in getting what you don't know, that is not possible. So this vertical trajectory is so tiny, and that is why this particular trajectory is what that man is actually exploring in balancing the rocks. And I'm going to show you so intuitively how we can get to understand this better. Don't forget that when you apply formula of everything, you get equilateral triangle. And then what is actually happening here is that this vertical trajectory, which is more or less like the present phase of time energy peregrination, is being flipped at this present phase, and so we have the inverse of the initial equilateral triangle. So the initial equilateral triangle represents the expanding cosmological space, while the flipped equilateral triangle is actually representing the contracting nature in the black holes. So now, right inside the black holes, you see that we have a suspension, neutron star suspension. So now suspension is highly essential in what I have discovered. Now you can see that at the classical level, we have this classical arbitrary suspension to be this big blue convergence, and right inside the system we have this small blue convergence to be the real classical mass worth. But if you now look at the quantum realm, we have this big red convergence to be the quantum arbitrary suspension, while the real quantum mass worth is outside the time energy constraint. What that is telling us is that before this 2D diagram of time energy wave emergence, before it can actually harness its full potential, it must get connected to the higher dimension. So if we call this to be 2D, then the higher dimension will be 3D. But then what we're going to pay attention to is this vertical trajectory. This vertical trajectory is static by being vertical, but at the same time it is undulating, because if something is said to be instant, it means that the thing will be too snappy to exist, and that is why the nature of time by default is invincible. But then time has two identities. Time is instant by default, but when time is in relativistic scaling to energy, it becomes continuous. Then energy, on the other hand, too, has two identities. Energy is infinite by default, but when energy is in relativistic scaling with time, then it becomes discrete. So now, once you understand this, then you can get to know that it is ideal for us to have this elongation in order to bridge the divergence of energy to time. And the elongation that we have is as a result of the undulating of energy. So energy has elongated time. Time is like trying to shrink everything to a point, but energy is elongating it for us to have this bridge as we have it. Now, this is what is happening in the elongation of energy to time contraction. This trajectory, right from this blue big convergence down to this red big convergence, that is what is known as free fall. So don't forget that we annihilate suspended zero. So there is not going to be any effect of energy on that annihilation. It's going to be free. You understand? Because it is zero. And now, for you to understand what this is all about better, there is this there is a way you can actually represent 369 in form of equilateral triangle, because its geometric representation is equilateral triangle. But then you know that the 9 is at the topmost, and when you double when you double 9 or you half 9 to get its digital root, you will only get 9999, and that is actually telling you the instancy of 9 as it travels. But then if you double 6 or 3, or you have 6 or 3, you're going to have this alternating of 6 and 3, 6 and 3. So if you double 6 and 3, or you have 6 and 3 to get its digital root, you're going to have that alternating value. So basically, I just want to briefly open your eyes to what 9 can actually achieve for you. So 0 can actually serve as a placeholder for 9, and 9 can serve as a placeholder for 0. So what do I mean by that? If you have this exponential, or you have index of, let's say you have index of 9 squared. That is the index that you have, 9 squared. The 9 squared that you have, do you know that you can actually get the answer of that 9 squared if you, or rather, let me put it this way, sorry. Don't let me say, I don't want to say 9 squared. I don't want to go to that. I don't want to go to that. What I should have said would be, if you say, if you say 2 times 9, 2 times 9 will give us what? 2 times 9 will give us 18. Okay, so now, because we have 9 in what we are multiplying, 2 times 9, but then there is something you can do. You can actually represent that 9 with 0. You understand? And so if you represent it with 0, you have, if you represent that 9 with 0, and then you now add it to the digit that you are multiplying with 9, you're going to have it with 20. So Now, when you now um I want to get this concept right. I want to get it right. So you I want to get that concept right. Okay, so basically I will expatiate on that. I just get stuck right there. There is no point to, try to say anything further right there. But I will still get back, to that concept if I understand it quite all right. But then it has nothing to do with what I'm trying to prove, the quantum, the mystery of quantum gravity that I'm trying to prove. But I just want you to see how, nine could how 9 could serve as placeholder for 0, or how 0 could serve as placeholder for 9, because I have used that in one of my videos to solve that 369 as proved by as suggested, or as put forward by Nikola Tesla. So basically, now I'm going to use the second diagram, and the second diagram that I want to use it to actually dissect the equilateral triangle so that we can understand how quantum gravity works, how classical gravity works. But before I do that, I've said that right from this big blue convergence to this red convergence, we have free fall right there, which is the classical gravity. But then what is quantum gravity? Don't forget that what we're trying to unravel here is the quantum gravity. So now, right from where we have this red big convergence to the curvature of this energy, what we have there is known as compacted equilateral triangle. And by having that equilateral triangle being compacted, that will constantly accelerate momentum in order to balance with this vertical trajectory, so that we can have what is known as standing wave. It is this standing wave that will be projected into the higher dimension to get connected to the electron of the higher dimension, which will be instantly converted to positron. And the moment we have that positron, the electron in the nucleus will be instantiated, and that what we have there is known as quantum entanglement. So the reason quantum entanglement could transmit information instantly is for the fact that it has transcended into the higher dimension, and what we have there is known as complex system. So the transition from the substrate dimension to higher dimension is complex system. So now we have this instant transmission of information. So basically, that is telling us that the feedback that we're going to get from the quantum realm to the classical realm to that classical mass world will be instant. And that is a conscious experience, which I called objective conscious experience, because that will allow us to know the classical position to quantum position. You understand? So by knowing the exact position of quantum counterpart to the classical position, that is what is known as self-awareness. And the moment we have the integration of the positron into the substrate dimension, so as to energize momentum, to propel momentum towards the singularity of the black hole, right in the black hole, when you reiterate the application of formula of everything, what we have in the core singularity of black hole is the suspension of remnant of electron. We realize that the electron will actually be moved forward at its power right from that minus 32 to 31 in the core singularity, while the base will be to 1.1. So the kind of phenomenon that we have there is known as, is, let me say, is synonymous to quasar-like signal. So we have this swing forth and back of that, electron right in the core singularity, but electron is being suspended, and that is actually giving us that virtue of infinity. But then the momentum will actually relocate this classical mass worth to the intersection of this time instant trajectory and this energy infinite trajectory. There is where the classical mass worth should be, and that what we have there is known as subjective conscious experience. So actually, I'm saying this for you to really understand, the power of this formula of everything, what it has unraveled, because it has solved many problems. It has solved the mass anti, I mean, it has solved the antimatter conundrum. It has solved many problems. But basically, now, what do we now have from this red blue convergence to the curvature of energy? What we have there is known as nucleus, you know nucleus. But then right inside the nucleus, don't forget that the moment time could break through this quantum arbitrary suspension, the next thing that we have is spontaneous symmetry breaking. And when you have spontaneous symmetry breaking, what you are going to have is going to be convergence of mass worth. But the convergence of mass worth that we have is more or less like arbitrary mass worth, because the electron is undefined until it is connected to that positron of the higher dimension. So now this mass convergence is what we actually, shrink down the slice of time in such a way that it will be aligned to the curvature of energy for us to have that standing wave. So now that mass convergence serves as resistance to that free fall that we have right from the classical level. So now quantum gravity is more or less like a resistant force to classical gravity, and I will open your eyes to it. But the issue is the resistance is so tiny compared to what we have at classical level, and so it is insignificant. But then, for instance, you can get to see the effect of quantum gravity. If somebody should fall from an height, the person will actually be falling down. The person will experience that free fall because the person will not even feel the weight. With the person will not feel his weight, you understand? So we're going to have that free fall. The essence of the free fall is just to nullify the differences in mass worth, because the kind of balance that we have in that free fall is to actually balance what is so tiny to what is so heavy. So when you are in that gravity phase, mass is insignificant because the energy and time will be so regulated to balance, you understand? And so if you could get connected to this power of balance of gravity, then you can do what that man did in that video, you understand? So now we can see the effect of that. But for you to know that quantum gravity is also at play but insignificant, you realize that if somebody is falling from an height, and if that person has cap on his head, if the person should actually release the cap in the air, where that cap is being released, that cap will be suspended to that person, even though two of them will be falling at the same speed. The cap will never touch the man until the man reaches the ground. That is when the cap will then touch the man. So by having such suspension, then it means that there is a particular resistance which could serve as, a kind of mass convergence. You understand? And that's what we have there is known as quantum gravity. Now, for you to understand better, when you are approaching the earth, when you go up, when you move away from the earth, you see that you will accumulate mass worth, which will be, which is known as, potential energy. But when you are falling, you will experience that free fall. You understand? That is because you are approaching the earth. You are approaching the central point of the earth. But then what do you think will happen if you are moving away from the earth? When you are moving away from the earth, you experience that you are accumulating mass in form of potential energy. The reason you have that is because you are still the uh, within the power of gravity of the earth. But if you should travel away from the earth such that you escape that gravity, the gravitational velocity, then in the space you will see that you will be floating. You'll be floating, then you can see that you now have the effect of that cap not touching the man the boat as the boat fall. You see it will be more significant in the space because the weight is being nullified for you to experience that float in the space. So scientists call it microgravity. So now this quantum gravity with the free fall, that is the kind of balance that we have at this central phase of this diagram, or rather at event horizon. There is this kind of balance that we have at event horizon that gives us slight break in momentum, and because of that slight break in momentum, we could have the inverse. We could have the black holes contracting, which is actually an inverse of the expanding cosmological space. So it is highly needed for us, or highly essential, to have that break in momentum to allow for that flip mechanism to take effect. So that is that. But I'm now going to use this equilateral triangle to actually, prove this, to prove it quite all right. But then before, okay, let me quickly get that. I want to quickly, yes, I want to quickly get that. Yeah. So now this is the diagram that I want to use. So now this is the diagram that I want to use. This is where you'll be able to get to see what is actually happening with gravity. We're going to see, the mystery of quantum gravity. We're going to see the entirety of gravity right here. But then before I tell us this, okay, so let me continue. There's something I wanted to say before, so I will explain it further if I get to recollect it as I explain this. Now this equilateral triangle as we have it, when you look at it, you see that we have this addition constancy here is actually, if you dissect it like that, the constancy is actually sustaining the expansion in this case, because at the other side we have contraction. So when you have contraction in one side, you must have expansion at the other side. So now from that you can get to say that the equilateral triangle has this inherent value or inherent feature of asymmetric phenomenon. So, by saying it is equilateral, we shouldn't have variations, but then we have variation. You understand? So basically, that is pointing to something that we all need to dissect. Now, let's count this. I want you to see that contracting nature of this equilateral triangle. If you count this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. If you count the 2, you have it in 9 places. You can see that it's reducing. When you count this 3, you have it in 8 places. If you count this 4, you have it in 7 places. The 5, you have it in 6 places. The 6, you have it in 5 places. The 4, you have it in 4 places. The 8, you have it in 3 places. The 9, you have it in 2 places. So diagonally like that, you can get to see that what I'm talking about, the contracting nature by variation, as we have it right here. But then don't forget that in that diagram, the one I showed you earlier, we couldn't have the instantiation of electron simply because the pressure, the compactedness, the temperature right inside the nucleus is so intense that we couldn't have had that instantiation of electron. But then at higher dimension, don't forget, higher dimension relative to that substrate dimension will actually give us higher degree of freedom. And by having such freedom, then we could have the instantiation of that higher dimensions electron. And by the virtue of relativity, yes, we could have the instantiation of that substrate dimension as well. You understand? So basically, by the time I go back to that diagram, I'll show you that the positron or the electron that we see when we have this wave collapse, as scientists have always been dissecting in the quantum phenomenon, the wave collapse that we have, the instantiation of the particle as we have it at the collapse of wave is not even the particle of that exact wave. It is the particle of the higher wave. You understand? So we have this relativity, we have this interconnectivity per dimensions, and that is how the universe is being structured. You understand? So then you'll be able to see clearly what I'm actually trying to prove right here. When you look at, I want you to focus on this baseline now. Now, this baseline, focus on it and then relate it to this one that we have at the topmost region. If you now dissect this, what do you have? You see that you have a contraction to one suspension, which can sustain the expansion of variation as we have it at the baseline. So basically, what this is telling us is that any object, no matter how big that object is and no matter how fragile the object is, if you can actually be patient enough to capture that static and undulating field, you can actually use that fragile object to sustain that heavy object. So every object has its spot in the universe where it can actually be balanced by the other fragile counterpart. You understand? So that is that about gravity. And basically this equilateral triangle, when you look at the extreme right side, if you look at these numbers that we have, you see that it's actually pointing to a particular pattern. Don't forget, we have 1. When 1 plus 2 will give you 3. 1 plus 2 plus 3 will give you 6. This pattern, as we have it to be in form of odd number, we have odd number and even number alternating, but then we have them to be in two places, and that is actually telling us that two is better than one. So if you look at the Schwarzschild solution to Einstein general relativity, he discovered two singularities, or rather let me say he discovered two infinities. So basically, by having these two odds number alternating with even number, it's actually pointing to that we often have these two solutions in the universe, and so they could alternate as we have. So all these numbers as we have it, they are triangle numbers. So now you can say 1 3, that those are odd numbers. 6 10, even number. 15 21, odd numbers. 28 36, even number. 45, these two will give us 45. I now made that to be the inverse of this 45. That is odd number. So now you can see that pattern right there. So that is the solution to the mystery of quantum gravity. And this is being solved by the formula of everything I derived in my research publication. Now, the links to my research publication will actually be specified in the description section of this video. You can click that link to get to my research publication and then work more on it by yourself. So now that is that. And another thing I want to okay, let me just, you see what I have here. I want to let you know that every number, like 1 from 1 to 0, has its own significance and meaning. So every number has its own significance and meaning. So basically, the other time I was like trying to connect 369 to my analogy by trying to prove how 0 could serve as a placeholder for 9. So if I'm to actually discuss this, then it's going to relate to 369. If you look at the diagram, the logo that I have right here, this is just the stacking of 6 to 9. The 9 is the blue 9 pointing to the past. The 6 is the red line pointing to the future. Then we have 3 to be the central connector. You understand? So basically 369 is actually pointing to something so profound. I have I solved 369, and I relate that to equilateral triangle. You understand? In one of my videos, I solved this 369, then related it to equilateral triangle two equilateral triangles that are being stacked upon each other. So basically what we have right here is more beyond it's far more beyond the scientific perspective, you understand. But basically, just to let you know that we have, by having that complex system as we have it, is another issue. You can see the certificate of the publication right here of that research publication. So I think I will just have to call it a day right here. So you can see this is the peer review judgment on. This is just the peer review. This is the peer review judgment on that publication before it was accepted, and what it was accepted for, and things like that. So basically, I'm just going to, now this is the title of one of the research publication. I have two research publications. So this one says seeing the anatomy of quantum gravity, or seeing the anatomy of quantum gravity through formula of everything. So the other one is the time theory of the universe. So I'm going to put links to my research publication in the description section of this particular video. So now you can see the significance contribution, because it's a novel research discovery. So the mark was 3. The originality of content, that was 4. Technical quality was 4. Clarity of presentation 4. You understand? So that's it. You can see my name right there as the author, Olusegun Shotade. So that is the title. So that is that. And now you have it, the mystery of quantum gravity. You understand? So all glory be to Almighty God. And well, for you to really understand my concept, if you really want to understand the entitle of what the mechanics of universe is, you will have to watch, my videos. In fact, I even have shotadiology, which is a newly proposed field in science. And this is a field where you can get to know what consciousness is. It's a field where you can get to know what functional information is. You get to know what functional information is. You get to know what consciousness is. In that diagram, I briefly discussed what consciousness is. So consciousness, we have it to be in two phases. We have the objective, which will come from the higher dimension for you to be self-aware. And when you are self-aware, then you can get to know if you are truly where you're supposed to be or not. And based on your conviction, then when you now have the internalization of what is being injected for you to be self-aware, then that internalized yes, the internalization process will then give you the subjective conscious experience, which will then, align what you are being self-aware of to where you should be, as it will align for that to be your personal and subjective experience. What do I mean by that? What I'm trying to say is, if you get to hear a music, if you don't listen to that music repeatedly, you cannot internalize that music to the extent that you will always remember every lyric of that music. But if you listen to that music continually, such that you can actually recite every lyric of the music, then the music has become your reality, and that has reformed you to be a new being. So basically, you must be aligned to that newly discovered um, conscious experience for it to become your personal reality. You understand? So basically, that is consciousness right there for you. So if you watch Shotadiology, you will get the entitle of this concept. You can watch that Shotadiology series. I have it in series, and it's a newly proposed field in science. It's a field that actually connects, you know, hmm, it connects, physics, what physics is all about, to, consciousness and some other things that we don't currently have as a science in science field. You understand? So basically, that is that. I believe this live session is quite informative, and if you like it, please make sure you subscribe to my channel, because you will get to, see novel research discovery like this. You will get to widen your horizon, I'll be uploading more videos. And then there is a place where you can actually support me. I'm currently working on advanced research on time travel. So there will be a link to that in the description as well. You can get to that page, subscribe to any of my community tiers. You understand? There you can get perks, my free gift, and then after that, I'll be uploading some videos that I will not upload on any other social media or any other platform. They are powerful videos that can actually empower you. You understand? And so that is that. I'll call it a day. Thank you for your time. God bless you.